was such a crazy game. So it just did not seem like a Michigan game plan. TCU had game control, but obviously Michigan was able to overcome all those mistakes to get themselves in position to win. Your thoughts about the approach to the game and so forth?
Yeah, I think, before the game, and I was doing, a lot of previews and stuff like that, and people asked me, how do you see this game going? And I said Michigan does need to control the game, and if they get into a shootout, I don't love Michigan's chances because that's never been Michigan's game under Jim Harbaugh. It's always control the game, run the ball, that type of stuff. And I think everybody was pretty worried when from the get-go, outside of Donovan's run on the first play of the game, Michigan wasn't able to establish the run, unfortunately. And so that ultimately bit them. I think for the first time since Blake Corum's injury, Michigan really, really missed Blake Corum. I think that Donovan Edwards is incredibly talented, but he runs downhill completely. And what they needed was a little sidestep of those linebackers sometimes to get through the hole, and they just didn't have that versus TCU. But, ultimately, as you said, Mark, how many times – I would love to know the stat of, how many times a team has thrown multiple pick sixes and won a game. It just doesn't happen that often. And then you add in not scoring from the 1 yard line twice, and that's a 28-point swing in a game where you ended up losing by 6 points. So you played well enough to win the game, but also bad enough to lose the game ultimately. And so I think it's, they were, what I would go with is super uncharacteristic mistakes for Michigan. JJ McCarthy had thrown 3 interceptions all year going into the game, and then throws not only 2 picks, but they both go to the house. They fumble on the 1 yard line. They haven't fumbled much all year long. They, with the best offensive line in the country for the past 2 years, run a triple reverse pass, whatever it was, on the 1 yard line. It just didn't feel like a Michigan game. It felt like they were trying to do too much or get too cute or a lot of different things. And ultimately it cost them. So it was tough to watch as a Michigan fan when I think, that game is played not 10 times. Michigan wins 7 or 8 of them. And I talked to a lot of the guys yesterday, actually, and they all feel the exact same way. I think they were giving props to TCU, but also felt like they were for sure the better team and didn't feel like TCU was, as good as what the score showed.
And if that sounds like an excuse, or, we can always speculate about what would happen in a game that's not going to be played. Look at what happened in the second semifinal game. So I think that shows how strong these two teams are, meaning Ohio State and Michigan. This game, I don't know that people clearly grasp what an aberration of a game it was, because yes, this was a TCU kind of game, but even TCU, look at their scores. They're not playing 51-45 games. They're playing in the 30s. That was even way past that was just a crazy game with just every big game. There's some twists and turns and things that you don't expect and all that. But that was just the second game, for being just as dramatic and so forth and so on, was more uniform in terms of just two great teams playing each other.
Right.
The Michigan TCU game just had weird things going on constantly.
If you're just a sports fan watching that game, it was so exciting, but weird at the same time. You go down 21-3 and then you're just coming back. Michigan gave up 30 points in the second half. And I think they had given up 30 total in the previous 5 games in the second half. And so it's one of those things where Michigan did not Michigan things. But also, you look at it, Michigan scored 39 in the second half and lost. I would love to know that stat as well, of how many teams have scored 39 points in the second half and lost. It was crazy. It felt like, the whole time, even when you're down 21-3, I think when you're watching a 13-0 Michigan team that is obviously played really well in second halves, you're like, all right, when's it going to happen? They're going to turn it around. Something's going to happen. This defense is going to stop them, and the offense is going to get clicking. And it did, but like it ended up being not enough. And, I thought that outside of JJ McCarthy, the 2 pick sixes are crucial mistakes. That's, there's no way around that. But I mean, that kid put the team on his back in the second half with no run game going at all and said, I'll do it myself. And they started slinging it for the first time they had done all year. And to be honest, that made me question a little bit. Why weren't you slinging it more all year? Because the kid can throw and these receivers can get open too.
No doubt. We got Justin Rowe here from Blue by 90 and also Wolverine.plus. Check out Justin's work and the rest of the staffs there. Do you think that Michigan players looked past TCU? Because I know that there were a couple comments made prior to the game, and I didn't go directly to the source to find out if they were skewed once they got to me. I heard through somebody else, they didn't know what conference TCU played in. Well, anytime I hear that, these guys, they're not football analysts that watch this stuff. They're college students and they play football. That doesn't mean they dissect every, top 25 team and know the landscape of college football. So I think there's a difference between if you're posed the question, TCU, they play in the Big 12, or do you know what conference they play in or whatever? And honestly, somebody saying, I don't know, versus making a kind of an offhand remark. I don't even know what conference they play in.
Right. No,
I think things like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it was Junior Colson that said that, the star linebacker for Michigan. And so here's what I would say is like, I think he answered the question or something. It wasn't he's not going out being like, I don't even know what conference they play in. They're so bad or something like that. But, he says that, but I can guarantee you he knows every player on their offensive team and their tendencies because he's watched the film on them. So, like, I agree with you. It's one of those things where the media and the fans are going to be like, oh, they aren't even taking them seriously. Well, guess what? He also watched film on them every day for an entire month. And so it doesn't really matter, what all that, I don't know. I will say, like, to answer your question, I felt like Michigan, for the first time in a while, looked a little bit deer in the headlights. A little bit, they looked a little shocked that TCU was playing with them as much as they were. And I don't know if it was because of the way TCU played or more because of Michigan making weird mistakes themselves and being like, we don't usually do this. Now what? So I think there was a little bit of shock factor that, like, whenever you're down 21-3, you're going to be like, what the hell is going on? But I think, it was more, I would say it was more so that they were like shocked that they were making the mistakes than they were that TCU was, outplaying them or something like that. And, one thing that I talked to these guys too is they felt like they were a little too locked in. Michigan has played loose all year long. They've been, you look at JJ McCarthy and they're down at Ohio State and he's smiling the whole time. That's the kind of stuff that they've had all year. This game, it felt like they were like, they shut down all the bowl activities. They were just they were almost like too focused and not loose enough. And I felt like, sometimes that can get to your head. And then, like, when things don't go your way, now you're like getting really, really tight. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm not a football coach and I've never had to prepare a team for any situation, but I know from Super Bowl history in particular, there's a ton of stories, especially early in the history of the Super Bowl, where one team was loose and now they didn't party till 3 a.m. the night
Right.
before, but they enjoyed their time and decompressed because you can only stay locked up and laser focused for so long. And then a couple days before, they started to really tighten up and get ready. And those were typically the more successful teams than the ones that showed up 2 weeks in advance. And from day one, it was nothing but football. Let's shut everything else down.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that Jim Harbaugh, so last year versus Georgia, I think they really enjoyed the bowl experience. They were happy to be there. They went to all the festivities. That game didn't go well. So in his mind, he's like, all right, we're shutting all that down. We're going to be laser focused. We're here for a business trip. we're going to go win this game. And there's probably a middle ground that needs to be found there. Right. But ultimately, like, here's the thing is I think the most disappointing thing for when you look at this game in the season is like, this Michigan team was super talented, and you watch Ohio State go up against Georgia, and it's like, dang, Michigan could have won a national title, like, legitimately, And so I think that is like, that was talking to the guys. They felt like they were not only the better team versus TCU, but they felt like they really had a chance to win a national title, and they were good enough to do it. And that was the most disappointing thing for these young men.